Hi guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to create fog and mist in response to a question from G-Man. Thank you for your comment, G-Man. And what we're going to be looking at is how Superfly handles fog and mist. So first of all, I should explain some limitations. So what we have in this scene here is mist in a forest, and the further you get from the camera, the denser the accumulated mist becomes until you can't see anything in the background. So we can kind of create that. Uh, what we have here is, well, let's find a better example here, is what's known as depth cueing. And depth cueing is the further you get from the camera, the more washed out the colors become until any detail is completely lost. Now you can do that in Firefly renderer, but you can't do that in the Superfly renderer for some reason. Maybe it's some cycles limitation, but I doubt it. So depth cueing, if you're ever trying to do depth cueing, it's just not going to be possible in Poser. And let's have a look at some more. So here, mist, we're definitely going to be able to create that. You know, it's basically there's mist across the entire scene right up to the camera, but it's very faint. So it's only the accumulation of water particles the further away you get. Again, you could think of this as a kind of depth cueing, but not quite the same. Um, and Again, that's depth cueing, which we can't do. There's some kind of washing out here, which we can't do. But as you see here, generally, the colours remain vibrant at all distances up until the very furthest distance. Then what we have here is just fog and mist. So here we have some fog swirling. So we'll be able to create that swirling effect, but we won't be able to create the start distance. That's a limitation with Superfly fog. So let me just show you a couple of scenes that I've created just to give you some realistic expectations. So here's a forest scene with a kind of an alien abduction with some god rays here, very subtle god rays, and fog with some swirling fog here going off into the background. And here is some mist, which I guess you could think of that as depth cueing. If I reduced the mist volume, it would essentially work like depth cueing. So let's have a look. So here's a scene in Poser that we're going to create, and as you can see, it looks perfectly normal. In fact, let me just set the render settings really low, and then turn off my atmosphere here. So now, if I render that scene, at the moment it just looks like I'm working on a normal scene. If I render that scene, perfectly normal scene with a spotlight on the character. Obviously, because it's dark, you're going to get some noise and fireflies down here. It's, you know, you're really going to have to ramp the settings up. That was optics kicking in there, not optics, post FX kicking in there to smooth it. But if you compare that to this scene, which I warn you, the render times shoot right up when you start using atmospherics, you'll see that we've got a lot going on here. So I'm just going to talk you through the main parts of this scene. So actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to create that scene again, more or less from scratch. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to load a forest background. I'm going to make this background invisible. Then I'm going to load a background called forest, which is environments, forest and woodland. This scene is called Forest. It's by First Bastion. It's a set that I quite like. This takes a while to load, so I'm probably going to cut this and jump back in after. Okay, now I'm going to add a Michael 4, pose him, and again I'll jump back in afterwards. Okay, so here's our scene loaded. We have our forest set. I have the background invisible. I have Michael looking up at a light which is not in the scene. Now here's something very, very important. The default lights include an area light and a infinite light. When we're doing atmospheres, we need to get rid of any infinite light. So let me find the infinite light. So I'm just going to go into properties. So I'm going to go through the lights one by one until I find the infinite light. In fact, it would be quicker to just delete all of the lights. Let's just do that. So I'm just going to go up into script, utility, delete lights, and then I'm going to add. So atmospheres work best with spotlights. So I'm going to create a light here, spot. I'm going to see where it's come into the scene. So it's 0, 0, 0. That's nice and easy. Oh, Z is slightly forward towards us. So I'm just going to lift that up. And I'm going to tilt it so that it illuminates more of the scene. Okay, I'm going to lift that higher and higher and higher. Tilt it, tilt it, tilt it. And now I'm going to have to increase the angle of the end so that it illuminates the whole scene. So I could mess around here with multiple lights. Let's go a bit further back. There we go. Okay, let's give that a super quick test render. Okay, I think this is set up to render at HD 1920 1080. I'll change that in a second so that it renders. Yep, there we go. Okay, there's already an atmosphere in that. Let me switch that off because I want to show you how to create that. Also, atmospheres, as I said, they really slow things down. So let me just turn that off, get rid of that. Right. So let me just render that dimensions to just match the preview. There we go. So now the atmosphere is turned off. We just have a single spot from the front and above looking kind of down towards him. So one of the things about mist and fog is they have a diffusing effect. So the light tends not to come from any one point. It's hard to locate light sources. You know, if you've ever driven in the fog, you can still see point lights, but the sunlight above, if you go through enough fog or mist, it just kind of hides everything. So this is kind of a bleakish scene. So let me just turn that light up a little bit. And part of the skill is, okay, we'll call this fog light. Part of the skill is knowing how bright and where to position your lights to make them effective. So let's just say 300. Once we get the fog in, that's going to change even more. You know, we're going to have to mess about with those values. Okay, there you go. That's something to work with. Okay, so now all we do to add fog is go into materials and create atmosphere. And then you can choose. Now, as I say, depth Q is not supported in Superfly Renderer. Smoke is okay. Smoky room, I find that not to be much point, but fog is the one that we need. So we select that, and what that's going to do, it's going to run a Python macro, which is just a weird way of saying a macro, I guess, or a script, and it gives us this warning that it can only be seen if there's something in the background. If there's no background, you won't see it. And then we say okay, and hopefully, okay, maybe I clicked. Okay. All right, sorry, I didn't have atmosphere selected here. So atmosphere is in objects, and there we go. Right, okay, it's actually added 2 now, which is annoying. Let's get rid of that. So here's the root node, atmosphere, and it's added this cloud node here. Now, when you preview it, you just get blackness, which is really unhelpful. So we've got a couple of things you need to worry about here. Volume density is how thick the fog is. Volume step size is how would you say, it's kind of the detail as you go back, the granularity of the fog, and then the volume noise interacts with volume step size. So I tend to find that these don't make much difference, to be honest, but volume density is the one that you really need, and then volume color. So even though this is white, the fog can often be black. It depends on the amount of other light in the scene, and they all interact with the amount of light in the scene. So let's give that a quick render now, and you'll see immediately how much slower that is. Okay, so that's quite a nice misty effect there, isn't it? Um, we we perhaps want to make that a bit scarier. So look, we've got the mist on the edge of the woods there. That's a nice level there, but let's make that a bit more threatening. So we're going to go up. We're going to turn the volume density up by 10. So I just delete a 0 here, and see, often that just, I go by multiples of 10, but then you kind of fine tune in between. I do that pretty much on all of the parameter sliders, to be honest. It's just a good way of estimating down to something. In maths they say when you're trying, there you go, much too dark. In maths they say when you're trying to guesstimate, you go in factors of 10, and I do the same thing. So way too dark there. Now I could add another light here where he is to brighten that up, but what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to reduce that density. So 10 was too much, so let's say make that 0.5 instead. So I've just doubled the density. I suspect that's not going to be enough, but let's have a look. Okay, that's getting there. I think we're going to just need to make that a little bit thicker. Okay, I'm also going to take the light down a bit because I want that to be more spooky. So the light intensity, I'm going to take that down to 100. I'm going to double the fog again. So I go object in the material room, atmosphere, and I want this to be volume density 0.1. Okay. So once you understand the basic process for creating fog, it really is just a matter of sucking it and see, and kind of spiraling in until you get the exact settings you want, as with so much of Pose. Right, that's way too dark now. Probably so I like the fact that the dark light has created this dark spooky, but actually that's almost there. I'm not going to change that right now, and you'll see why in a second. So what I want to do is I want to bring in it's not really a god ray, but it's a visible spotlight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another light here, and it's going to be a spotlight. We're just going to call that spot this time, or no, we'll call it ray. Oh, UFO light. What UFO light? Right. So he's out in the woods alone, and a spooky UFO is facing at him. And I want to make sure that that light is shining kind of down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that technique I showed you before the other day of creating a target light. So I could just view the light through the light camera and just aim it, but I prefer this for this particular thing. So I'm going to go into primitives in my props, and I'm just going to bring a ball into the scene here. So there's the ball, and I'm going to take that ball back to somewhere by his feet. Doesn't matter, it's not going to be visible in the final render because I'm going to turn it off. Now I'm going to go back to my light. So I call that UFO light, and I'm going to make that object point at ball 1, which is really just my target. So now wherever that light is, I'm going to know that it's pointing at that ball. Why am I pointing at the screen? Oh, an idiot. Right, okay, now I'm going to change cameras. I'm in my main camera. I have shortcuts set up, so I'm going to press A for auxiliary camera, and I want to actually see that light. So what I'm going to do, the light is selected here and here. What I'm going to do is go display, object style, and then I'm going to do flat shaded. So now I can see the light wherever it is. I think it's back here. Is that it? Let me have a look. Where is it positioned in the scene? Okay, so it's back in Z, but it's got no Y height. So let's lift it up. There you go. You can see it coming in here, right? So I'm going to have this right off to the side, like it's looking down on him. Right, so we can see that now. Okay. Let's move it more to the side. And I want that to be a lot higher. So you can see the higher you go, so the angle end is the size of the cone. If you imagine a cone of light coming out from this point, the angle end is the end diameter of the cone, and obviously the higher you lift the light, the more the cone, the larger the cone will be. So you often have to adjust the end with the height to get the effect you're looking for. So what I'm looking for here is to create quite a narrow beam. So if I go back to M, I want quite a narrow beam just around him. I don't want the whole scene illuminated, so I'm going to reduce that end size, but the the further the light, the less intense it is. Right, I'm just going to show you something here. I'm just going to turn off the atmosphere so that it's quicker to render. So it's a volumetric atmosphere. That means that it has X, Y, and Z depth. In other words, it's not just a mist template over the top. It's actually you can travel through it if you like. So if I just quickly render that, just so as we can get an idea of how that UFO light is looking. Right, that's actually not bad. So that's facing at the ball, so I can just move the ball now, the sphere. But one of the problems with the normal spotlights, as I said, they are cone shaped. So this light will be like this, whereas I want more of a parallel edged light, especially if, say, I was making God rays instead of a cone. So what I'm going to do, here's a little trick for you, is I'm going to choose that light and I'm going to increase the scale of the light. Let's say 1000. So now the width of the emitter is much larger. So now I'm going to have to reduce this end angle again, and I'm going to have to mess about with the intensity. Let's have a quick test render there. Now we won't see the cone effect until we put the atmosphere back in. But I think we're going to have to put this intensity up to 500, 1000, something like that. Okay, so we've got the area of influence is okay. Let's bring the atmosphere back in so that we can see it kind of having an effect. So atmosphere, turn volumetrics on. I don't know why it has depth Q. I guess if you're doing Firefly, but that's something they really need to fix. Okay, so that's awfully dark. So I'm going to turn the intensity of that spotlight up, the UFO light. As I said, I thought I would need to do that. So I'm going to turn the intensity up by a factor of 5 for now. Let's see how that looks. I have to say it really, really helps having a decent processor, decent graphics card. You know, the 3090 which I'm running now is, well, it's still quite expensive. I guess it's over £1,000, you know, for $1,400. But if you use Poser a lot, just the ability to do quick previews like this is really worth its weight in gold. So here we go. So now we're getting somewhere. So our main fog light has not imparted too much light into this fog, so it's kept it night looking. So the UFO light, which you can see the cone of kind of here, is now illuminating down. I could even go higher on that light, you know. Let's go we'll go to 1000. I said I might need to go that high. And because we've got the atmosphere turned on, it's given us this lovely little vignette of fear. The kind of, you know, it's really amplifying the sense of being isolated. We're losing a lot of the forest in the background. I could put more lights in the background. In fact, while that's rendering, let me just show you with this one, I had a little tiny bit more light in the background, just so as you can see the trees in the back. This tree's not illuminated. I could probably move my main light my fog light backwards a bit so as it picks up this tree, but I actually quite like that framing. Let's compare that to that. I actually prefer it dark. It increases a sense of spookiness. Now, if I wanted this to be more daylight, I'd just have more spotlights around the scene so that you could, so this fog was white. But you can see there that that's starting to work quite nicely. And again, I have this lovely target light, this target here, which I can just move around to change where the light is pointing at. So I'll just move that over a little bit here. So he's a little, so I'm just going to bring the light a little bit higher up its body. And I think that would be about done. Now, as I say, whenever you're rendering in darkness, you're going to get an awful lot of noise, and you won't be able to fix that just by having post effects, because it'll have a very, very serious smoothing effect. So what you're going to have to do is ramp the rendering right up, the render quality. So okay, I'm quite pleased with it. Oh, I forgot to turn this ball off. So I've got ball selected here. All I have to do is make that invisible. Even when it's invisible, you can still move it around and change your render light, by the way. So when we go into render settings here, you could, so I'm going to go optics high. If you've got an older GPU, so your GPU is not really contributing, you could instead go with a high CPU value. Supposing you've got a high core CPU, then that might be a better option here. So whatever, I'm just going to go with optics high. Now, if you really wanted it, when you're doing fog, you could do ultra caustics. But if you're going to do, so caustics is like kind of noise in the fog or in water, and it just ramps up the realism another level. But if you're going to turn that on, you'd better be prepared not to use your computer for the next 2 hours, because it's going to take forever to render. I'm just going to go with optics high here. So the post FX is what's smoothing it, that's saving me. Volume bounces, I could turn that up again because it's a volumetric fog. I'm not going to really bother. I don't really care if it bounces accurately inside. All I care is that it diffuses the light. And I also have my bucket size here, which is the number of pixels by the number of pixels. So it's 128 pixels across by 128 deep is the size it renders. Really, I should have that over 1,000, but I'm not going to bother. Well, let's do it now. Let's do 1,000 because I know my GPU can cope with it. And then when I render that, in fact, I'm not going to leave the whole scene to render because it's so slow. Even without caustics, just on high quality, it takes, probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes to render. I don't know why it looks like it's doing oh right, I know why. I was going to say it looks like it's doing a bucket size of the whole screen, but this is why it's doing that. Progressive refinement. So it does the whole screen, and then it does a bit, and then it does a bit, and it improves the whole screen progressively, I guess. Rather than doing, if I do it now, you'll get a bucket come up here, a bucket come up here. I prefer that because I always feel it I don't know, you get a better feel for any given area. Okay, why is that? That's still doing progressive. I didn't turn that back on, did I? Oh, no. Uh, that is strange. Okay, I'll turn that back to 128 for now. Right. There you go. There you go. So this area presumably is less than 1,000 pixels high. I don't know why it did that, but it's certainly not less than 1,000 wide. That was really weird. Anyway, so I often find that this way of going is quicker, but on this particular occasion, I'm not sure it is. So I'm going to go back to where it was. That was a long way of taking us back to where we started. So progressive, you're going to see the whole screen go at once. I guess in a way, progressive is better for getting a flavour of the overall image, but here it's having to do whatever number of pixels this is, you know, 1,000, I don't know, whatever. It's having to do them all simultaneously. Then it does another layer simultaneously. And I just feel like that's like trying to juggle 30 balls at once rather than just one at a time, you know. It would be obviously boring juggling one ball at a time, but, you know, not going to overload yourself. So anyway, so that's looking quite nice. The God ray's a bit more apparent, not the God ray, the spotlight's a bit more apparent. Now, God rays. God rays are caused by sun shining between clouds or between leaves when the humidity is high, or just when the humidity is high. So on a misty day, for example, or up in the clouds, you see a break in the clouds, and then you see the sun shining on the clouds, but there's still a lot of humidity in the area where the sun is shining. You can achieve that more specifically. You know that kind of stripy God rays. Let's see if I can find an image on internet. Right, let me just type God rays on the other screen while that's rendering. So there, God rays. So even though it looks like a gap in the clouds, which it is, it's actually just a lower density area of the clouds. But you see this kind of striping here? In theory, you can achieve that in multiple ways in Poser. There is a light filter effect that you can put on. Well, I'm going to stop that rendering, but you see it's still noisy here. So whatever your normal settings would be for dark, which could be 50 samples or more, you're going to need to increase it for fog. Okay, so I'm going to give that, so I might as well leave it, finish the last little bit. And it's going to post effects, smooths it out. This fog is not very choppy. Not very choppy actually. Sometimes you can get the fog. If I go to atmosphere, see this cloud pattern is what defines the color of the volume, and depending where your lights are, this will be much more swirly. Like if you look at my earlier rendering, see it's a lot more noisy and swirly over here. I think I probably made it a bit thinner and I had some lighting behind. So this can be quite important. But I was talking about God rays. So if I go up to my light here and I have fog light, what I can do is I can attach an image map to the color, if it will attach to that, for goodness sakes. And then what I can do is I can put in a filter. So say stripes here, and in theory what that does is it stripes the light that comes out, but to be honest I'm not finding that to be the case. If I kind of give that a start again, so that acts like a gobo, which is like a light filter. I can't be bothered to research that deeply for the sake of this video, but that is a theoretical solution to how to create God rays. The other one, because we have an atmosphere, is simply to move the light up above the trees, and then the light will be interrupted by the leaves, and that will create a kind of a God ray effect anyway. A third solution would be to create a plane and then attach that stripy texture or whatever texture you want, black and white, as a transparency map to the plane, then put the plane in between the light and the target here. So you put it fairly close, and then that just interrupts the light. So it's a brute force way of doing it. I know that definitely would work. But anyway, that's a couple of ways of doing God rays. Right, so as you can see, the gobo hasn't worked. Now what I'm going to do is just show you one other thing. I'm just going to load a different scene. I'm not going to save that because I've already got the one that I did for the render. Right, this scene, instead of fog, I'm looking for mist. So this scene is called Rural Crossroads. The other one was called Forest by Andrei Pestryakov at DAZ. This one is Rural Crossroads from First Bastion. I really like this set. Let me just quickly show you the this is the advert page for Forest, and this is the advert page for Rural Crossroads. So in this scene, I want it to be misty. So what I've got is a light way back behind the camera with a widespread cone here, a wide end angle, so it illuminates the whole scene. Then I've got another light up here just to light the fog up so as it's whiter. But here's the important thing in this scene. If I go into the atmosphere, I've disconnected clouds, or I could have just created atmosphere without clouds. Volumetric again. There's no point worrying about these start and end distances. They would do depth queuing, but as I say, you can't do depth queuing in Superfly. But then all I've just done is set a low volume density. So this time when I render, let me make sure the setting's not too high. No, that's fine. And this time I just get a mist effect, which I think is quite nice. So it's basically smooth fog. There's no swirls in it. It's just a nice even. Think of it. Think of fog as being a cloud at ground level, which essentially it is, and think of mist as being a high humidity. Two ways of saying the same thing, but a very different visual effect. But that's how you create mist. You just disconnect the fog swirl, the fog material here, the clouds from atmosphere. This is clouds. It doesn't actually mean it's going to make clouds. It's just this visual cloud effect. It's actually one of the 3D effects that you can get from just one of the default ones. You could attach any of these if you want, but clouds just gives you that swirly look. And you could mess about with the parameters here. You could make it thicker, bigger clouds, smaller clouds, more complex clouds, whatever you want. Okay, guys. Well, look. Hopefully that's given you plenty to think about. And as usual, I will speak to you later. But please leave a comment and a like if you found this useful. Keeps me interested in making content for you. Thanks, guys.